All right. Well, welcome back to the podcast. We're really excited about today's guest. Hi, Danielle.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I've heard so many amazing things from Caitlin, but we've never formally met before. So I'm really excited to hear about you and your story. So I want to ask you, what is your mission? If you had to say your mission in one sentence of what you're trying to do here, who you're trying to serve, what would that be?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about just educating and empowering women to understand and take control of their health. I feel like when I talked to my sisters and my friends when I was younger, going through med school, I realized there was a huge gap of understanding, and that's really what led me to want to focus on women's health.
Awesome. So you said you went to med school. What's your formal training?
Yes, I went to a naturopathic medical school out in Portland, Oregon. There's actually only 4 schools in the country with the program. It was a 5-year medical program after my undergrad, and then I did my residency in primary care.
Did you grow up around there?
No, I grew up in New Hampshire, but I did return back to Vermont for my residency. So I kind of just ping-ponged from one coast to the other.
Okay, gotcha. So tell us your story of how you got started, why you chose to go to school for that, why you ended up in women's health.
Yeah, so I was a ballet dancer. That's how I met Caitlin. We danced together at Joffrey Ballet in Chicago. During my time as a dancer, I had an eating disorder, as many dancers do, and that's kind of what prompted me to get interested in nutrition. I was, 19 years old. I was trying to overcome my eating disorder. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition that impacts the thyroid. I had lost my period. I was bloated. My hair was falling out. I was just like a mess, and I was 19 years old. So I wasn't really getting any support from my family doctor. So I left the ballet world, went to University of Vermont to study dietetics. And I really loved learning about nutrition, but at the time, I felt like I was too newly in recovery to become a dietitian. I felt like I didn't really want to talk about food all day, every day. I felt like that would be a little bit too much for where I was at the time. But I also knew I didn't want to go to conventional medical school because I didn't really love the pharmaceutical industry. I didn't want to be prescribing all day. So while I was in undergrad, I was also completing my Pilates teacher training certification, and my mentor, her husband, was a naturopathic doctor. So it was my final year of school, and she had told me, look into this kind of medicine. It seems like it'd be kind of up your alley because it involves nutrition, but there's so many other aspects to it. There is prescribing pharmaceuticals. There's supplements with herbs and nutritional products. There's lifestyle medicine. So I started shadowing a doctor in Vermont. I said, yeah, this sounds good. So I went to medical school out in Portland, Oregon. It was a 5-year program. And then when I graduated, I returned back to Vermont. I was actually a resident for that initial doctor that I had shadowed 5 years prior. And then my residency ended, and 2 or 3 months later, COVID hit. So I started applying to a couple clinics around the country. And I got a few job offers, but just realized that working for someone else wasn't really my passion. And so I started working with women virtually because it was COVID. A lot of things were virtual. Everything was virtual. And I realized that working virtually allowed me to connect with women who were in parts of the country or even parts of the world that didn't have access to this type of medicine. And I didn't really set out to necessarily specialize in PCOS and fertility, but that kind of fell into my lap. And I just realized how much that population of women is underserved in the conventional medical model. So now that is primarily what my practice focuses on, although I see everything from painful periods to digestive symptoms to unexplained infertility, recurrent miscarriages, not just PCOS.
I mean, your story started out like so many of our stories. I have a similar story where my health broke down when I was 19 too, and I have a story with PCOS. And I feel like that is something that happens where you kind of, the world opens up for you health-wise, and you realize there's so many different paths you can take, but it does somewhat feel like being pigeonholed if you're just going towards dietetics or just going towards herbs, and realizing that health is all encompassing. And I think that naturopathic medicine does blend everything so beautifully.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I didn't grow up at all with. But it's funny because now it's boomed a lot in New Hampshire and Vermont. I'm originally from New Hampshire. And now I feel like everyone has a naturopathic doctor. It's so like mainstream, common, which is great.
How would you say that your approach, specifically yours, Danielle's, but also the naturopathic approach, differs from like conventional medicine? And like you said, your family doctor wasn't really giving you much answers. Like, what do you do differently with clients?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I definitely take a more holistic, whole body approach. I see a lot of people coming to me for fertility, for example, and they've had like the bare minimum labs done. Maybe they've had a couple hormone tests done. It's not even on the right day of their cycle, but their doctors aren't looking at nutrient deficiencies, thyroid, blood sugar, inflammation, digestive health. So they're not taking the person into consideration. They're like looking at the reproductive tract as this like isolated unit. When, our body is a system, everything works together. So that's really how my approach changes or is different from the conventional model. The other big piece, I think, is giving the power back to the woman. I felt like when I went to my family doctor, she was basically telling me, like for me, my bloating was so severe that I would have a couple bites out at a restaurant and I would have to go to the car and unbutton my jeans and lay down because it was like that painful. And she was like, yeah, it's just people get bloated. Like that's just kind of aging. And I'm like, I'm 19. I'm not aging, But I feel like I want my clients who come to me to, a lot of times they've lost hope because they've been in the conventional medical system for so long and they've just been told, take this pill or is there something we can do for you? So I hope that when they come to me, they feel like, okay, there is so much I can do in my daily life to feel better and take control of my fertility. And, I don't have this stamp of infertility like I've been told. I just haven't been given access to the information that I need to make it happen for myself.
Yeah, I know Caitlin and I both relate to walking into your doctor's office and saying, I'm dealing with a slew of these issues, and them kind of being like, it's fine, your labs are okay. But like you mentioned, knowing when to test on a monthly cycle, knowing what to test, and really believing your clients is huge. And specifically because you work with fertility and you mentioned empowering women, I wanted to talk a little bit about empowering women in fertility, specifically around age, because there's a lot of jargon and stereotypes around the fertility journey and age, and that there's an age cap. So how do you work with women who are maybe in their 30s or, past the fertile age that the conventional medicine model says you have to have your baby by?
Yeah, I mean, if you're 35 or over and you're pregnant, you're considered a geriatric pregnancy, which I feel like there could be a different term for that. It's a little aggressive to call it a geriatric pregnancy. But yeah, I mean, I have plenty of women who are 37 to 41 who are working on getting pregnant, and our primary focus is egg quality support. There is going to be, somewhat of a decline in egg quality as you age, but there is this notion in the conventional medical model that there's nothing you can do about it. It's like your age is the only defining factor. And that's just not true. So whether somebody is 35, 36, and maybe they're not trying to conceive, but they know that they want to in the next 2 years, I say, let's start working on egg quality support now because it's never too soon to do so. Or if somebody's coming to me who's 39, 40, who's maybe been trying to get pregnant for the past 2 years, I say, let's get the egg quality support on board right away. And of course, there's other layers that we're looking at, making sure their thyroid is optimized, making sure their blood sugar is good. But when it comes to age, really supporting egg quality is my number one focus. And I don't think it's ever too soon to do that. I also don't think it's really ever too late to do that as long as you're having a cycle. Somebody who's like 45 and hasn't had a period for 2 years, probably not really going to push the egg quality support at that point, going to have a different conversation. But yeah, somebody who's 40 years old who wants to have a baby. I had someone just last week who's 40 and got pregnant, and she was, worried that she wasn't going to be able to do so. But we've been really supporting her body a lot over the past 5 months, with a huge emphasis on egg quality support. And now she's pregnant.
That is honestly such a relief to hear. And I think there's a lot of women who need to hear that, especially I have a good friend of mine who's 41 and she still has her period and she wants to have kids one day, but it's just such a relief to be able to share that with women and give them that empowerment that like, if you're over 25, it's okay, But it does take two to tango. So like, what about sperm quality? How much do you think that plays into fertility?
Yeah, I think there's so much focus put on the woman. And I always advise my clients when they come to me that we should be discussing their partner's fertility as well. But, about 33% of infertility cases is related to the woman alone, 33% is related to the man alone, and 33% is related to a combination of the two. So really important that we're not overlooking men when it comes to the equation. There is so much we can do for sperm health, very similar to egg quality support. Fortunately, men have definitely a longer window of, kind of peak fertility. But, they're not invincible. It's, men, when they get to be over 45, they have a higher risk of having a child with schizophrenia. So there is some risk to age for them as well. And I honestly see plenty of men who are 25, 30 who have terrible sperm health. Because they don't eat well, or, they're stressed, or they smoke cigarettes, they drink a lot of alcohol. So, important. I see women sometimes doing all the things and then their partner is doing none of the things. And that's like, okay, we need to meet somewhere in the middle here. So yeah, I think it's really important to include them. I think with women, because we have a period and that is such like a clear marker of our hormonal health, it's easy to say, oh, well, I as the woman don't have a super regular cycle, so I know the problem is me. But it might not just be you. It might be a combination of the two. And I always tell my clients, like, I'd hate for you to be doing months and months of work only for us to find out in a year that it was actually also your partner that had to be doing some of this stuff as well.
Mm. So do you recommend to your clients or encourage them to have those conversations with their partner and really invite them into the process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, usually we'll start off with a semen analysis. It's a pretty easy test to do. I'll even tell my clients, like, I don't necessarily need to meet with your partner. Like, if they're not quite there yet, I wanting to do that, but at least send me the results. I can provide you guys some education and information that he can then go and take to his primary care and discuss. But kind of similar to the way I look at my female clients' labs is going to be more so through the lens of, are these optimal for a healthy pregnancy? Not just, are these generally okay for existing and living? And I have the same parameters for a semen analysis. So I've had some men who are like, oh, I had my semen analysis done. The results were fine. And then I look at it and it's like, yeah, they're fine, but you're not conceiving. So we don't want fine. We want optimal. So there actually is work that we could be doing here.
That's so interesting. And I think that's such a point that a lot of people are missing. And on top of that, like the worry that comes with worrying about not only your own egg quality, but your partner's sperm quality. And I think going into the preconception phase and even in pregnancy, you get hit with so many uncertainties, whether it's like, is this vaccine safe for me? Is breastfeeding or formula feeding or financial stresses? There's so many things to think about in the preconception phase and in the pregnancy phase. So just speaking mentally to those challenges or navigating the murky waters with so much jargon around, is there anything you do to help your clients stay grounded and feel safe in their bodies and just kind of embrace the unknown and the uncertainty that comes with the entire fertility journey?
Yeah, I think setting small benchmarkers or small goals along the way to celebrate and be excited about is important. when my clients come to me, it's unlikely they're going to get pregnant in the first month. You know, a couple people have. That's been kind of a fluke thing, but usually it's a process and it takes time. So instead of just being solely focused on the pregnancy test, I'll set goals for them, whether that is, okay, can we get your cycle under 35 days? Can we get your energy to a better place that when you do have this baby, you actually have the energy to be present with them? Can we get your sleep in a better place, that your anxiety is better during the day? Your anxiety related to fertility is improved. So setting those small benchmarkers so that way they can see that they're making progress, even if their primary end goal isn't hit super quick. I think it helps keep them motivated and helps keep them believing in the process, because it can be hard, when you, especially a lot of times by the time they've come to me, they could have been trying to conceive for 6 months, for 3 or 4 years. So I get some people who come to me at the very beginning of their fertility journey, but I get plenty of women who have come to me after a lot of disappointment, sometimes recurrent miscarriages, so a lot of loss. So for them, they're kind of like at the end of their line, and they're usually reaching out to me as like a last kind of like lifeline. So it's kind of my responsibility to be that motivating piece for them, so that they want to continue moving forward and making the changes that will help them get their body to where it needs to be.
Have you ever found a healthy food you love only to discover it's actually loaded with toxic ingredients, greenwashed with pretty packaging and clever marketing?
Yes, it is so frustrating, and you are not alone. That's why we created Master the Market, your ultimate guide to shopping smarter, decoding tricky labels, and stocking your kitchen with truly nourishing foods.
This extensive ebook breaks it all down, from hidden additives to the best produce, proteins, and pantry staples. You can shop with confidence.
Say goodbye to grocery store overwhelm. Grab your copy of Master the Market today. Click the link in the show notes to get started.
You've explained your process of how it's so supportive for your clients. And you've mentioned egg quality quite a bit already. So could you explain for the audience what that really means and why it's so important, not just for conception, but also for overall health and well-being as well?
Yeah, so our eggs live in our ovaries. Each month, we get our period. There's going to be kind of a new batch of eggs that are developing in our ovaries. That number varies. For some people, it's 4 to 6 eggs each ovary. For others, it's 20 eggs each ovary. But the health of our eggs is partially determined by the 3 months leading up to that growth phase. So really, when we think about, okay, how long do I need to be focusing on egg quality before trying to conceive, I usually say a minimum 3 months beforehand. But the health of our eggs is going to also determine the health of our baby that is then, created from those eggs. So that's why it's important from a fertility standpoint. And with low egg quality, we can see just difficulty getting pregnant. We can see recurrent miscarriages. So really important. I think that everyone should be thinking about egg quality before they conceive, whether they're 25 or 40. But then our eggs, as they're developing, they're also producing estrogen. So estrogen is really important for the body. It helps with our bone density. It helps with our tissue health, so our skin health. We can see more vaginal dryness if estrogen levels are low. But if we have low egg quality, we often will see low estrogen as a result. And then we can see more of those low estrogen symptoms. And we're thinking long-term, longevity-wise, then we are at increased risk of either osteopenia or osteoporosis. We can see low libido, we can see weight gain. So it's not, the egg quality piece isn't just fertility specific. It does impact our overall hormonal health as well.
Right. So you can kind of see it in other aspects of how you're feeling. And you mentioned that 3-month window. So what are some of the most important lifestyle, environmental, or genetic factors that might be influencing egg quality?
Yeah, so nutrition is going to be really important. So, focusing on whole foods, especially foods that are high in antioxidants and high in omega-3s. So antioxidant-rich foods, we think of those like brightly colored fruits and vegetables, our berries, our pomegranate seeds, our tomatoes, our carrots. So I really try to encourage my clients to get a diversity of fruits and vegetables. I see a lot of people struggle with the vegetable piece of it. And then, of course, eliminating more of those inflammatory foods like fried foods, processed foods, artificial sugars, alcohol. All of these things can cause oxidative stress in the body and can impact the DNA and the health of our eggs. So that's really like foundationally, if somebody's like, I don't know where to start, I don't know what supplements to take, like at the very base of it, just make sure you're eating whole foods, lots of fruits and vegetables. The second piece is environment. So thinking about exposure to heavy metals or molds. This is going to be obviously more on an individual basis, but the kind of population that comes to mind for me that I've seen be a problem in my clients is those who work in the hair industry. So people who are working with cosmetics, they're working with hair dyes, they're breathing that in every day. Those are the people, like, especially if they've been trying to conceive for a few years, that I'll say, okay, is there, obviously I don't want to say like quit your job, but is there a way where maybe we can be cutting hair and coloring hair less, just getting you out of that space a little bit? And I have had some clients who do say, okay, I'm going to take a 3-month break from work and see if this works. And for them, it actually has helped. The other piece is stress. So we know that stress can also impact, egg quality, how many eggs are developing each cycle. And a lot of times the source of stress is work. So I also have had clients who are like, I'm going to change jobs, which again, I'm not telling people quit your job right and left, but these things that you're, routines that you're in every day, like constantly, do play a huge role on your fertility. So, sometimes you can't, out supplement a really stressful job. It's just like, it's not going to be, black and white or balance out in that way. And then in terms of genetics, so if your mom had trouble conceiving, or if she went through menopause really early on in life, usually we can look at our moms and the age that they went through menopause is more or less when we can kind of predict to go through menopause as well. But if you're somebody where that your mom struggled to conceive or she went through menopause early, then even more reason to kind of get ahead of the egg quality support now, even if you're not thinking about conceiving for 4 or 5 years down the line.
Got it. So lots of different things in our control. And I know we kind of talked about age as not being the only determining factor, but there are cases you've mentioned that even younger women do face challenges with egg quality. So are there any underlying health factors that could contribute to egg quality issues? And are there ways that women that are in their 20s and 30s can proactively address these?
Yeah. So one thing, and this is kind of relative to my situation, is any sort of autoimmune condition. So again, I have Hashimoto's, so my immune system makes antibodies that attack my thyroid. And those antibodies can also attack the ovaries and cause changes in the ovaries and impact egg quality. So that's kind of been a piece of my healing journey over the past year, is really getting my autoimmunity under control. So for anyone who has been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, that's something that I would start working on now, because that can be a long process. And the longer that you go with autoimmunity unmanaged, the more damage that's happening. So it's not something where you want to say, oh, well, I'm not going to conceive for 5 years, so I'll worry about my autoimmunity in 4 years, because then now you have 4 years of damage to try to undo. So that's a big one. And then also, which kind of also pertains to me from my younger years, is under eating, over exercising. We can see that lead to poor egg quality and a reduction of estrogen levels. So making sure people are eating adequate amounts of food, maybe even just switching to walking for a few months if they're like really overdoing it. But those are like kind of 2 things outside, of course, like the poor diets, the stressful kind of life situations that I look for in my clients.
And kind of speaking to that difference between your naturopathic approach and the conventional model, have you seen women coming to you with maybe undiagnosed autoimmune issues, or ones that have kind of flown under the radar and their doctor hasn't given them the attention that they deserve?
Yes, all the time. It's absolutely insane, especially when it comes to Hashimoto's. I'll see women who, have had their thyroid tested and their thyroid hormone levels are absolutely off the charts, indicating low thyroid function. Nothing was ever done about it. No antibodies were ever ran. it's really insane. Like the more I see it, the more I'm just like jaw on the floor. Like, how is this kind of just being passed by? I mean, I don't legally diagnose people because I more work as like a client consultant relationship. But I do say, you have the antibodies, take these to your doctor so that way they can kind of give you the diagnosis, because if these antibodies are present, then you fit the criteria for Hashimoto's. But oftentimes, especially when it comes to thyroid function, women are not having their antibodies checked. I think partially because in the conventional medical model, having the antibodies doesn't really change their course of treatment. They're going to prescribe a thyroid medication, whether they have the antibodies or not, if the thyroid hormone levels are off. So for them, it doesn't really matter if the antibodies are present. But from a naturopathic standpoint, we know that there's a ton you can do through diet and lifestyle to control these antibody levels. So we do care if they're present, and we do care what the levels are at.
Well, your clients are lucky to have you advocating for them, because I know how frustrating that situation can be when you know something is off with your body, but you're not getting the attention for it. So something that I know I've seen you discussing a lot recently is AMH, or anti-Müllerian hormone. This comes up a lot in fertility discussions, but I was hoping you could break down exactly what AMH is, why it matters for egg quality, and how it connects to fertility in a broader sense.
Yeah, so going back to when our eggs are developing each cycle, we have our eggs in the ovary, and then we have a follicle that's surrounding each egg. So the AMH is a hormone that's being produced by those follicles. So the more follicles you have growing, the higher your AMH. The less follicles you have growing, the lower your AMH. So if you have low egg quality and you don't have many eggs developing during that cycle, you're going to have lower AMH. Now, on the flip side of that, with somebody with PCOS, where they have a lot of immature follicles kind of collecting on their ovary, then we can see a higher AMH. So this is specific to my case. So about a year ago, I started the process for egg freezing, just kind of started having the initial conversation about it. I tested my AMH for the first time ever. Which, looking back, I'm like, I specialize in fertility. Why didn't I test this sooner? But it's not something you really think is going to be an issue for you until it is, especially because I don't really have any other hormone issues outside of my Hashimoto's. But I was told by the OBGYN I was working with that my AMH was very low. It was 0.6, and ideally we want it between 2 to 7. So when she told me that, she was kind of, I think, prepared for me to like break down and start crying. And she was like, I know this is really hard to hear. There's really nothing that we can do about it. Like once it's low, it's low. And essentially told me that I would need, 3 to 4 rounds of egg freezing in order to get the number of eggs needed to kind of have that security of being able to have a family later on in life. Fortunately for what I do and what I help my clients with, I knew that, the idea that AMH could not be changed was not true. So that's what I've really been spending the past year doing. And I have more than doubled my AMH in that time. But for a lot of women being told you have low AMH, they feel like it's a stamp of infertility. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. And then on the flip side of that with PCOS, women who have high AMH, once we get their cycles regulated and they're ovulating consistently each month, we'll see that AMH start to reduce.
Hey there, it's Caitlin, the creator of Cyclical Pilates, and I have something really special to share.
And I'm Caroline, yoga instructor and wellness enthusiast. I'm so excited to be joining Caitlin in the stunning Mayan Riviera this October for an unforgettable Pilates and yoga retreat.
That is right. From October 20th to 26th, 2025, we're inviting you to unplug from daily stress and reconnect with your body through cyclical Pilates, strength training, yoga, and restorative flows, all by the turquoise waters of the Caribbean.
And it's all happening at Copal Retreats, a gorgeous beachfront oasis where you'll enjoy luxurious accommodations, nourishing meals, a sound bowl ceremony, a 1-hour massage, cultural excursions, and plenty of times to relax and explore.
This retreat is all about movement, connection, and balance. With just the right mix of adventure and restoration, and with everything taken care of, all you have to do is show up.
Spots are limited, so if this sounds like the reset you need, head to the link in our show notes to reserve your place.
We can't wait to move, breathe, and unwind with you in paradise. See you in the Mayan Riviera.
Gotcha. Okay. So you mentioned you found out about your low AMH during your egg freezing journey. Who is a good candidate for egg freezing, and what factors should be considered before making that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone is a candidate. Obviously, there's factors in terms of the finances that go into egg freezing, the time commitment. I think especially if somebody knows they don't want to have kids until later in life, maybe like, late 30s, early 40s, and they don't necessarily want to have to go through the hoops of like supporting egg quality and potentially really focusing on fertility in order to get pregnant, then maybe they should be freezing eggs earlier on. Also anyone who, maybe they know they're going to be going through cancer treatment, oftentimes it's recommended to them to freeze their eggs, because that can impact egg quality and potentially make them infertile. So oftentimes that's one of the few times that insurance will actually cover egg freezing, as if you're going through cancer treatment. But really if anyone wants kind of that safety bank, egg freezing could be helpful. Now, it's not a guaranteed outcome in terms of like, oh, you just have to do egg freezing once and then you're guaranteed X amount of eggs and you're guaranteed those eggs to then, become healthy babies later on down the line. There are so many variables to it. So I think it's important to consider like, why am I doing this? The cost of it, is the cost worth it? Do I have the time to give to this? And then also, what's the predicted outcome? Based on my hormone levels, is it likely that I'm doing this one time, or is it likely I'm going to need 3 or 4 rounds of this?
Interesting. And so only when you're going through cancer treatment is it covered by insurance?
No. So there are some insurances, and I think it's more through the bigger corporations, and don't quote me on this, but potentially people like Coca-Cola. I'm just kind of predicting like these types of companies that have better health insurance plans for their employees. Mm-hmm. I know that for them, there tends to be more coverage for fertility procedures, whether that's egg freezing, if it's IVF. Maybe that means there's a pool of money that you can pull from to pay for these things. So there are some cases where insurance will cover it. It's not common, but if you are going through cancer treatment, then it is more of a given a lot of times, but not always.
Okay. And so we know, like in our American medical system, things are exorbitantly expensive. And you had mentioned to me previously that you found out that the price point of egg freezing in Europe is much lower. Can you speak to why there is such a significant price difference and how this impacts accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming country by country, it's just how their healthcare system is set up, more like the universal healthcare system. But I have a client who did a lot of research. She made this amazing Excel spreadsheet of all these different fertility egg freezing clinics in the world, not even just Europe, but South America included, and was just comparing pricing and what that included. And just to kind of put it into perspective. So in the States, on average, 1 round of egg freezing is going to cost about $11,000. And oftentimes that's not including the medications, which are often not covered by your insurance because it's considered elective. Sometimes that cost can go upwards to $30,000 once you add in all the medications and the visits. But in Spain, she had gone to a clinic out there and she paid $2,800 for everything, for the medications, for the procedure. And they freeze the eggs for free for 5 years. Versus in the States, you're paying, a couple $100 a year to freeze them. So when she sent me that message and I read, she was out there doing it and she said, this is the final price, I was just floored. I'm like, I cannot believe that is what a significant difference. And unfortunately, it might actually be cheaper to fly to another country, pay for your plane ride, pay for your hotel stay for 2 weeks, do the egg freezing, than it is to just do it in your own city.
I mean, that's what I would do after hearing this. That's such a stark contrast.
Yeah, it's really sad.
That's huge. You did mention that this is not a like a sure thing. Egg freezing is like not a guaranteed outcome. So what are some of the potential downsides, maybe some risks or limitations that women should be aware of?
Yeah. So again, kind of be aware of what your predicted outcome will be. And the OBGYN that you're working with can kind of help you assess that. So what they'll do is they'll do an ultrasound to look at your follicle count at a particular time during your cycle, to see, okay, how many eggs and follicles do you actually have growing that month? They'll also look at your AMH levels, and then they'll also look at a hormone called FSH, which is a hormone that the brain makes to trigger those eggs and follicles to grow. So if you have a high FSH, it means that your brain is having to kind of yell at your ovaries to respond, and that's not a good sign. So based on those three things, they can kind of predict how many eggs they might get from one round. So I think it's important to consider realistically how many rounds might you need. When I realized last January that I would need 3 to 4 rounds, and that would be like, $50,000+, I said, let me focus on egg quality first, improve my numbers, and maybe get to a place where I can do this once. And honestly, I'll probably go to Spain at this point.
Might as well get a vacation out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that sounds much better than just staying home. Also considering, the financial piece of it, is this going to completely put you out for, how many years? Are you going to be in debt? Consider the cost of storing the eggs and the timeline you plan to potentially use the eggs, because you could be paying to store them for 10 years versus potentially 2 years. And also consider, what's the likelihood you're actually going to end up using them? For somebody who's like, I know I'm really career focused. I know I don't want kids until I'm 40. I will, 80% chance I'll end up using them, then probably worth doing. For somebody who's like, I'm 32, I might have kids in the next 1 to 2 years, I might not, then kind of weighing the pros and cons of that. From a physical standpoint, it does take a toll on the body. There's about 2 weeks worth of hormone injections that are happening. And then there's something called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, or OHSS. And this essentially can happen right around the time of the retrieval and after the retrieval, where the ovaries are so stimulated that they become very enlarged and swollen. It can be very, very, very uncomfortable and painful. When I spoke to the OBGYN last year, she said it was very rare, but honestly, I've known 4 people to do egg retrieval, not including the one that just went to Spain, and every single person got OHSS. So maybe it's just like unlucky in my circle of, friends who did egg freezing or egg donation, but every single person got it. So I'm like, it doesn't really seem that uncommon to me based on who I'm talking to, but again, maybe it's just coincidence. So I think important to consider all those factors: the cost, the time, the outcome, and then also the toll it's going to take on your body.
Yeah, that's like a really great picture of what somebody might be getting into. So in your experience, how does understanding our body's natural rhythms and cycles help people align with their fertility? And are there any tools or resources that you recommend for people to maybe explore this deeper?
Yeah, I think number one is tracking your cycle. That way you can also see if anything starts to change. Maybe your cycle is super irregular, and then if anything starts to change for the worse, like your cycle gets really long or your period gets really light, these are things that might sound, quiet alarm bells to start looking into your hormonal health a little bit sooner. So tracking things like how much are you bleeding during your period, how many days are you bleeding for, tracking your luteal phase, so tracking when you ovulate and how long after that is it that you get your period, so that you kind of understand, is my body making enough progesterone to support fertility? I think the more data you can have, the better, because you get your period and then the next month you get your period again, but so much happens in between then. It can be hard to remember what happened last month, let alone 6 months ago. And a lot of times changes in your cycle related to hormones doesn't just happen overnight. It's kind of a slow, gradual process. So by tracking it and kind of comparing notes month to month, it can alert you a little bit sooner, and you can kind of get in there and take action if anything starts to kind of get off course in terms of your fertility.
Excellent advice.
This conversation has been so interesting. I feel like I'm learning so much, and I also feel like I'm going to need to listen to this 3 times to have it all like really sink in. I wanted to ask you though, say like someone listening to this is in their preconception phase, or they want to conceive in the next like 2 to 3 years, or maybe they're already on their fertility journey. There is so much to take in, and it can be really overwhelming, and it can be a little bit scary, even feeling like there's so many women around you who are maybe struggling with their fertility. Is there a like sentence or two of assurance or some kind of compassionate words you would say to them as they enter this phase of life?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that our bodies were like made to carry babies. Women's bodies, we're not saying that every woman's body needs to carry a baby, but we were literally built to carry babies. And your body doesn't want to fight against you. So if you are concerned at all, I would say start working with someone sooner than later, just for the peace of mind of being able to kind of cross things off the list and say, okay, I know everything right now is kind of looking where it needs to be. I don't really have a reason to stress right now. Like until I'm given a reason, I'm not going to stress. But in the conventional medical model, women are told just keep trying. And then when they get to a certain point, then they're told, okay, let's send you to IUI or IVF. And there are so many steps that can happen between those 2 points. So I think that piece of it is really what is lacking a lot of times in the fertility conversation. And that's what makes women fearful, because they're like, okay, well, what if I just keep trying and it just doesn't happen? And then I have to go pay, $50,000 for IVF. And then what if that doesn't work? And it really just completely takes the power away from the woman. So I would say, remember that your body was made to do this, that it doesn't want to fight against you. And if anything does come up down the line, there are ways to support your body naturally to get it to do what it was made to do without having to go straight to invasive procedures like IUI or IVF.
That is a beautiful reminder. It can feel like the consequences are so big. Like you said, having to go the IVF route, egg freezing everything can be so expensive. And the journey can seem like it would be a rough one. So it feels like the consequences of it would be so rough, and that fear alone can be so scary, but it is a really comforting thought to be reminded that like our bodies are made for this. And we do believe that, our bodies aren't working against us. They want what we want. And we are, as women, biologically made to carry babies. That's a really beautiful and comforting thought for sure. And so I heard you say, if you're in this phase, something you can start doing is working with someone. And are there any other, like maybe 1 or 2 baby steps that someone listening could take to get started?
Yeah, I mean, I would say number 1 is just kind of go to the basics. I think a lot of times we like to go straight to like Reddit or Google and start Googling, okay, what supplements do I need to be taking? And then, I see a lot of women taking just like a laundry list of supplements where it's like a whole meal's worth of supplements. But they're skipping breakfast, they're drinking coffee on an empty stomach, they're not sleeping well. So before you go down the rabbit hole of like all these additional things, go back to the basics of, am I fueling my body well? I see this a lot in new moms where they'll barely eat during the day because they're so focused on their baby. And I say to them, you wouldn't want your baby to skip breakfast. So don't let yourself skip breakfast. And I think thinking about taking care of yourself in that way of like, how would I take care of my child? Let me take care of myself in that way of fueling my body well, getting good sleep, cutting out any stress, setting the boundaries that I need to, I think is, important for fertility, but also just like general wellness and life and sanity. The other piece I would say is, know your levels, get your blood test done now. That way you have the information either for peace of mind, or you have the information so that you can say, okay, maybe there are some things I need to start working on now. So that way I'm not in crunch time when I actually do want to start trying to conceive. So working with somebody who understands like, what does a full, comprehensive fertility panel look like? Not just let me test these random hormones on random days, and it's not really going to tell us any useful information.
That was something that another guest on our podcast had brought up too, the importance of testing your hormones at the right time of month. And also just having blood work in general, like your comprehensive metabolic panel, your cholesterol panel, like those are things that most people don't even really get tested. And if you're listening, we do have a couple of resources. We have our free health advocacy toolkit that teaches you how to advocate for yourself with your doctor and get those tests done, request those tests. And we also have, because I heard you mention just setting the foundation of your health. That's what our 10-week reset program is all about. It's really about 10 weeks of setting the foundation of your health and kind of learning those things like not eating coffee on an empty stomach and just getting all those basics. So we have resources to be like a good first step as well. Is there any other resources that you have like that or programs that you're offering that you would want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I have my podcast as well. It's called Heal Your Hormones with Dr. Danielle. That's really where I share a bulk of my information, where a lot of my clients find me. And then I'm on Instagram at Dr. Danielle _ND. But I do work with all my clients virtually, whether you are in the States or in another country. So if you don't have access to this kind of medicine where you're at, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be limited. We are able to support you in your fertility journey. You're not just kind of restricted to, who's down the street.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you would want to talk about today?
No, I think we hit it all. I'd say one resource I love for egg quality is a book called It Starts with the Egg by Rebecca Fett. You get it off Amazon, but that has a ton of like the scientific literature just kind of back what I have been saying in terms of there are things you can be doing to improve egg quality. Even if your OBGYN has said that there's nothing you can do, I promise you that is not true because I have the numbers to prove it of my AMH doubling over the past year. So if somebody's kind of at a loss of where to start, I would start there, even just for kind of giving yourself hope and seeing, okay, there is something that can be done, even if I've been told there's not.
Thank you so much for giving people that hope. It's so huge. And this has been so fun to talk to you. You're such a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's Caitlin.
And Caroline.
If you've been feeling out of sync, whether it's low energy, stubborn weight gain, hormonal imbalance, or just not feeling your best, we've got something for you.
Enrollment for our spring reset is officially open. This 10-week expert-led program is designed to help you transform your health through our 3 pillars of success: accountability, consistency, and community.
Over 10 weeks, we'll cover everything from nutrition, movement, and sleep to detoxing and finding your purpose, so you can build lasting habits and feel your best from the inside out.
You won't be doing it alone. You'll have personalized support from us, your expert guidance, and an amazing group of like-minded women who are on the same journey with you. Our current group is experiencing amazing breakthroughs, from food freedom to improved energy and focus, and even regulated cycles.
The reset kicks off April 7th, so don't wait. Secure your spot now. We are offering $250 off the full price for the early bird special from now until March 17th.
Head to the link in our show notes to sign up. Let's do it together.